the number one challenge in our country right now is the decline in connection and trust. When you move to a city, you learn how to turn on the lights, but no one teaches you how to turn on connection and community.
We sometimes talk about community as something that exists whenever a group of people share the same general location or interest. Once that's true, hopefully they'll all be sufficiently motivated to participate and find ways to connect with one another around that common cause. But more and more, that assumption doesn't seem to be holding true. All around us, people are searching for connection, but aren't sure how to get started. And for those of us trying to organize and build programs that serve communities, it can feel almost impossible to get new people involved. Our guest today is Aaron Hurst. He's the founder of an organization that's trying to tackle this problem called the Chamber of Connection. It's a great name, and I love what it represents. Aaron is asking, if connection is such a valuable resource, what would it look like to develop it more intentionally as essential civic infrastructure? Aaron has been piloting this work in cities, but what he's learned applies far beyond any specific location or shared interest. It's a case study in how we, as community builders, can tell stories of belonging and how we can make it easier for people to move from just being present into real connected participation. So, Aaron, I know what a chamber of commerce is, but what's a chamber of connection?
Chamber of connection, it's sort of, I guess it begins with just a realization on my end that the number one challenge in our country right now is the decline in connection and trust. And when I looked across the country, there's no real solution for addressing it systemically. Like, we've got a lot of great programs, we've got great people all over the country, but there's no systems level solution, and we're not bringing the voices and stories of all the people building connection together. So started the U.S. Chamber of Connection with a pilot initially in Seattle to really figure out what does the infrastructure for a city need to be to take connection seriously. That's it at the highest level.
Yeah. So what does that look like for you programmatically? Like, how do you get people to consider social capital as a real resource in a community?
Yeah, it's interesting, Tom. So we started off with sort of a sort of typical design thinking style process of trying to understand how to answer that question. Had dinner parties at my home with strangers every 2 weeks for better part of a year. Did a weekend design studio, just trying to really understand people's relationship with connection and what was going on, what were they seeing. A lot of it was personal journey versus theoretical. And the number one thing that emerged quickly was that Seattle, and I think it's true of a lot of cities, has a negative social story or an antisocial story about itself. And that a lot of what people experienced was reinforcing that or amplifying it. And that a lot of these things were not unique to Seattle, but because of that narrative, and the narrative is called the Seattle Freeze, which is what Seattle's known for, it actually was a big part of the problem. So the first thing we really realized, Tom, was that we needed to come up with a positive, pro-social counter narrative that people could get behind. So instead of confirming negative, we're confirming positive. And that really led us out the gate to think about what is an alternative to the Seattle Freeze. And what really emerged from that was the Seattle Bear Hug. What we came up with is this idea of what should it feel like? What should the physical manifestation be of living in Seattle? And we were we would love it if someone said, "Hey, Tom, you live in Seattle. What's it like to live there?" And you're it's like being constantly enveloped in a bear hug. That would just be the ultimate best sort of manifestation of that. So we opted with that as sort of our overall message, and we got a mascot, a bear, this beautiful huggable bear mascot that we've just been working the streets, working events, just giving out bear hugs, challenging people to sort of think about the narrative in a different way. And it's gotten an incredible amount of press. I think it's really captured people's imagination because it's so positive and it's not cynical. And seeing people who are, the grumpy person walking down the street suddenly, hug a bear and giggle like they're in third grade is just something that's irresistible. So it's been this remarkable thing. So that sort of was the first thing we did. But the core of what we're doing is really a recognition that the time when you can help people most with connection is when they move. After people move, they really lose a lot of their social and family support system. And they're also in a growth mindset because they know that they're going to have to adapt. So we've been really focused on building in Seattle the first ever city onboarding. So if you think about onboarding to a company or as a student at a university, like there's a process for becoming part of it. But no city before it had had an onboarding to the city itself. So what does it look like to onboard someone to a city? And that's what we've built programmatically. And I should say we're building. I mean, we've started it. We're at great results. We still have a long ways to go to perfect it. But I've been talking about it from a storytelling point of like when you move to a city, you learn how to turn on the lights, but no one teaches you how to turn on connection and community. And what we want to do is help people systemically across the city turn on connection and community.
I love that. It reminds me in some ways of almost like corporate onboarding. Like,
That's
if you're,
right.
you're coming into a community, you have of people you're working with, there's an orientation process that hopefully someone has put a lot of thought into, and they're giving you a chance to meet people and get connected to different things that are happening. Is that an aspect of where this came
That's right.
from?
That's exactly right. And I think that's been a key part of what's helped people get this is that we're saying it's like a corporate onboarding, but it's for the city and for everyone in the city who moves there, whether you're a refugee, corporate employee, student, retiree, all come together through this shared experience. And let's, like a corporate onboarding, make sure you know how we do things here, our values. Let's make sure you find a buddy or buddies. Let's make sure you sort of understand what clubs and communities are available. Let's really just help you establish that sense of belonging. And it's just a missing piece in our cities. And it's been so helpful just to frame it as onboarding that way because people go from like, what are you doing to like, oh, I got it. Onboarding to companies, onboarding to city.
So I know like in corporate onboarding, like one of the challenges is authenticity, right? Like it's you can make a video about your mission and vision and values and how great a place this is to work, and then you look at the cubicle next to you and the fluorescent lighting and like the truth doesn't line up and it's all a bunch of fluff. How do you take something like a bear hug and make sure that's going to click? Or is it more just experimentation? How do you find the pieces that are really authentic to a culture like Seattle?
Yeah. I think a lot of it's about themselves. So we do a Seattle Welcome Day every month. It's a 4-hour workshop that we do, which is sort of the cornerstone of this onboarding. And we talk about Seattle some, but really what it is a place for them to reflect on where they found connection in their lives before and how do they want to replicate that and what do they want to try that's new. But they're doing that in workshop with another newcomer or multiple newcomers, and they're helping solve challenges for themselves and sharing things they've already discovered in Seattle. So they're authentically sort of finding solutions and supporting each other versus us saying, and here are the 50 best places to find connection and everything in Seattle is perfect. Like we're not doing that. We're more like helping people do their own discovery work, their own dreaming, and then supporting each other to build that dream in Seattle. And our core message is Seattle's a very young city. If you look at like the cities of the world, Seattle would be in diapers. Like this is a very new city. And what Seattle is, yes, let's respect all that has, come before us, but what Seattle is what you make of it. And you can be part of telling that story and don't assume Seattle's story's done and that you're just sort of reading it. Like you're creating the story too. So that's a big part of it. And the other part that came up a lot in the dinners that feeds into this is talk to people, myself included. Like I've been here almost 11 years. If someone's like, are you a Seattleite? Like my immediate reaction is no. Whereas like when I lived in New York for like a hot second, even during like immediately you're like, I'm a New Yorker. Like it's something that you sort of just adopt. Seattle like has created this preciousness around the idea of like, what is a Seattleite? So we have a video from the mayor that basically just, we play that, the short of it is like, you're a Seattleite if you want to be a Seattleite. Like, don't let anyone tell you what you are or you aren't. We're excited you're here. You're going to add value here. Whether you've been here a minute or 100 years, like you have no more or less right to call yourself a Seattleite. So it's that message of co-creation versus this is already how it is.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I think just structurally the fact that you're bringing new people together, like it's not all, Seattleite meet new resident and tell them how it is. It's a little bit more like, I imagine it's like a swim buddy almost. Like you've met at least one more person who's going to help you to kind of navigate what's out there. And do you find those people stay in touch at all, or
I mean, it's early, but yeah, I mean, we're doing a lot of like we're doing coffee matches afterwards. We're doing all kinds of events for them afterwards. So it's not just sort of a one and done process, but it's also, I mean, to your point, as a freshman in college, onboarding is generally about meeting other freshmen, not about meeting seniors, right? So we know that people are generally going to cluster based on sort of shared time they got here and that shared experience. So, we hope they build safety there and they start to branch out into the rest of the city. But it's also interesting just from a storytelling standpoint is we've had just as many people sign up to volunteer as actually participate. And we ask people like why they're volunteering. It's because they're working on connection for themselves, but they didn't feel comfortable saying they need help. Feel more comfortable offering help and then having their needs met through that process. So again, just a very interesting from a marketing and messaging standpoint, how certain people need certain things framed in order for them to feel like it's safe to enter.
So how do you build that story over time? Like you're reaching out to people who can participate in these events, but also it seems like you probably want to have awareness of the broader community. You want to be drawing in people like the mayor. Like how do you function as that bridge between pretty diverse stakeholders?
Yeah, I mean, it's a work in progress, but I think a couple of things like we've built a welcome committee of 45 leaders across sectors. So business, nonprofit, education, healthcare, government, and saying like, let's collectively own the success of the city around connection. And let's all be ambassadors telling the story of being the most welcoming city in America. Let's tell the story of what's possible. So that's sort of part of that strategy. And we've, with that, for example, our initial launch campaign was called Seattleite Since. And with each of our welcome committee members, we posted on social, Bob Seattleite since 2014, which is sort of making the point that the second they got here, they were a Seattleite. And some of them are like since birth. And then, posting their advice for how to build connection and what's worked for them. So a lot of it's like storytelling versus stating advice. Like generically, it's more like this is what worked for me. So I think that storytelling piece is the key to authenticity and the key to like having that stick and trying to find those really memorable stories that everyone takes with them. Like we all know those stories, as a CEO or a marketer, you're always looking for that one story that tells the story of everything you're doing and transmits it so that you don't have to do anything other than just tell that story. And our bear does that to some degree. It's like just such a manifestation of what we're trying to do. But just trying to find those nuggets that you can use to transmit the ideas through story.
So that's really cool. I've heard of this thing called the 6 points of connection. Is that you guys?
Yep.
So what is that? And let's talk a little bit about repeatable frameworks, maybe. Like I think it's easy to look at something like this and be like, okay, well, it's probably the mascot costume. I gotta go get a mascot costume, right? But it's like it's broader than that. So what do you think are the really repeatable elements of what you're doing here?
Yeah. So I mean, I think on that piece, it's just more about like, how do you get the stakeholders together to talk about what's already there that you want to reinforce as a story? And like a mascot's a way to do that. But I think it's more about like, what is the brand of your city from a social perspective and how are you reinforcing that, or of your community? The 6 points of connection. What was interesting is I was like, Tom, you really need to work on connection. You're like, okay, like, what do you want me to do? Tom, you're lonely, fix it. You're like, okay, what am I going to do? Like, it wasn't actionable. And it also just brought a lot of shame and judgment into the definition. And what we found is like, parallel, it's not quite perfect, but parallel is like food. Like, Tom, you're supposed to eat food, right? But if I just said like, Tom, eat, you'd be like, we as a society have created breakfast, lunch, and dinner as concepts, right? Like they're somewhat arbitrary, but like we created that as a social structure. What we realized was that with connection, we needed to break it down for people so that they had some understanding of like, what does success look like? And they could start to build their own story around that. So we looked at fields from civic engagement, democracy, economic development, healthcare, and like, what are people recommending for someone to have a strong sense of connection in their life, but also so that they're part of an ecosystem that thrives and is where they can continue to have connection. And we identified there were 6 activities that if people did, they both were going to thrive individually, but also be part of a thriving community. And those are the 6 points of connection. And they're how we measure success. They're that welcome dad has talked about. It's all structured around like, let's think about how you had those points or didn't in your past place you lived. What would those ideally look like? What is one step you can take towards those? So it's creating a framework or components to help someone think about what they want to build. And it's been very, very successful. I think people have been missing that in this category of connection. Just telling someone they need to make more friends is not helpful. It just sounds like judgment. And that's not sort of what's going to move someone forward.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to have something that's a little bit more accessible, something that you can break down into some bits and pieces and try to move forward.
No, and I think, I mean, just on the theme of story, like the hero's journey, you think about the hero's journey, like there's a structure to that. I think our lives have structures to them. When you sort of uncover some of them, it actually enables you to be more creative because it creates the structure to give you the freedom. And I think what the 6 points does, it does that same thing. It gives people the freedom to think about what do I really want in these, and for it to be normal to be exploring those things. And it also makes it possible to talk to someone else about that and like have a language for talking about it, right? The same way, like some of those frameworks, like the hero's journey, if you're talking to other people who are into storytelling, like they know what those different pieces are, and you can like immediately talk to them. It's shorthand for being able to collaborate.
Have you found that I don't know, how much do you talk to other cities? Like you said this is kind of a pilot in Seattle at this point. Are you starting to branch out beyond Seattle? Are other people interested in doing something like the Chamber of Connection?
Yeah, I mean, our vision, we started in Seattle as a pilot. Our vision is that every city eventually would have a chamber of connection. So wherever you move, Tom, like, okay, gotta go check out Chamber Connection, sort of get plugged in. Like it would be there as a utility, a resource for you. And also just to create a voice to bring together the stories of all the people working in the community to advocate to government, to advocate to corporations to make sure that we're prioritizing connection. We've just started doing the pilot in Seattle about 6 months ago, a little under. And we're now talking to people in probably about 20 cities that are interested in like, how would we bring this to our city? I think those are all early conversations. We're trying to figure out the best way to replicate this. And is it, what we're doing very specifically, or is it just more like we want someone to say, we're going to be the leader for connection in the city and we want to be part of that learning community as a country. But we think it is important to have that learning and the brand and sort of helping to build that national story about interconnectedness. And we've talked a lot about next year is America's 250th anniversary. So we've talked a lot about like, the Declaration of Independence, but that actually what we need now is the Declaration of Interdependence. And, how do we create that story that starts to take off as part of what it really means to be American, that it's not about independence, it's about interdependence. That is actually what makes us great.
Yeah, well, there's so much polarization, right? Like we don't have to go deep into that, but like it's everywhere, and so looking for ways to connect with people who are different from you, and
That's
not
right.
just people who feel the same exact thing as you do.
Exactly. And that's at the core of our mission, is trying to address that and looking at the science of how do you go about doing that. And a lot of the ways people are trying to do it actually they don't work because they're not based on behavioral science. So trying to really understand how do we do that. And our 6 points of connection build that in subtly so that we're setting people up to be in those experiences, but in a way in which they have the psychological safety to be authentic.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, I mean, as an adult, like, so for me, like I'm a parent, and just even having a context where you can connect with other adults and it's not incredibly awkward, like, meeting people on the playground. It's like, hey, we're both here with kids. We have something in common, or we're both here at a school event, right? We have a reason to connect. This sounds to me like another one of those good reasons to connect. Like
It is. I think it's also,
maybe social club, maybe something different, but just like bringing people together for a good cause.
yeah, no, I think that's right. And it's creating a structure around that. And it's creating a safe space where everybody knows everyone else is open to talking to somebody. So I think one of the big adult fears is, there's people in this room, but are they open to talking? Like if I ask them if they want to go do something, are they going to say yes? Like there's a lot of awkwardness there. Whereas if you can get a room of people who are all looking for connection, it's much more comfortable that way. But, to your point, like I'm experimenting with a lot of different sort of things on my personal front, just building connection. Like 2 weeks ago, just sort of with a friend who's also named Aaron, we decided we're going to have an Aaron dinner party where only Aarons are invited. And we're doing it next month. And we've got about 30 people on the list so far just in Seattle. And we're just going to talk about the shared experience of having the same first name. Like I think there's a lot of different ways to get people together, and most of them are relatively meaningless. It's more about creating that excuse to make it feel comfortable and safe.
Absolutely. Do you find yourself having to make the case for connection? Like you invite people to a dinner party, they come or they don't come, right? But like you launch a major civic initiative with diverse stakeholders. Like, do you have to explain to people why connection matters, or do you feel like people get it?
They get it. I think especially when you have them reflect on their own experience and then they can connect it to their own story. They're like, oh yeah. And whether they struggled with it or if they've had it now, you're like, well, imagine if you didn't. So there's that piece. I think there's helping them understand like the unhoused is a serious challenge in our country, and Seattle has a pretty acute challenge. And a member of our team who's a physician works a lot with the unhoused, and she's like, well, most of them move here thing, like they move here and like one thing goes wrong and they have no social support system and they end up on the street. Like a lot of the issues we look at are actually just because of connection or lack of connection. So just helping people connect those dots. I think the biggest challenge I'm seeing, Tom, is that the way philanthropy has moved in our country, it's become very specialized in specific populations and specific symptoms. So, which makes sense because if you have money, you're like, okay, I want to make sure I can make an impact. I want to be focused. I'm going to focus on Latinos who are unhoused in this neighborhood in Seattle. And I'm going to like work to really figure out how to address that. Makes a ton of sense. The challenge is like most philanthropy now is targeted to silos of populations, and there's very little philanthropic effort around the common good. And the story of the common good and things like what we're doing. I don't want to, I'll have, a foundation come and say, we really want to have you serve this population. I'm like, I'm not serving any population in isolation. Like our whole point is we want to break down silos, and rich people are lonely. Poor people are lonely. Every color of the rainbow is lonely. Like this is a universal human experience. Let's use this to connect, not divide. And I think that's been the harder challenge, is just right now, there isn't a lot of investment in common good. A lot of it's really investing in sort of specific populations. And I think it's well-intentioned, but causing a lot of the problem.
Yeah. Do you find, I guess you were talking about the people who come to the dinner ready to meet someone, right? And that's an audience that's like looking for connection and probably has to some degree like community-oriented collectivist impulses. Yeah, I find that not everyone feels that way. Some people are just a little bit more individualistic at whatever point they're on in their journey, or might be interested in connection, but not connection with me, just depending on what's going on.
I guess it's you, Tom.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Is there, I guess, do you have hope for all of us that we can find some common community?
I think you have to do like, it's a cascading set of circles, right? So like if you're not connected to yourself, it makes it hard to connect with like people closely. And that's sort of the broader, like further and further outside of that circle. So I think a lot of people haven't done the personal work to connect with themselves, and it sort of holds them back from connecting with others. So I think a lot of the good work in this field is actually more self-reflection work to help people with that. I don't think it has to be collectivist though. I mean, I know I talked about interdependence, but I think the reality is it's a core human need. 95% of happiness, according to an 80-year longitudinal Harvard study, is connection. Like our happiness is about connection more than money, health, like anything else. It's about connection. It's a human need. Introvert, extrovert, like it doesn't matter. Like you may need different flavors, but everyone needs this. We were wired this way. And when if you look back at your ancestors on the Serengeti, a bazillion years ago, like the number one predictor of your longevity as a human being back then was like whether or not you're part of a tribe and accepted. Because if you're not, you're out on your own, you get sick, you can't find food, whatever it is, like you're dead. So we were wired to like need connection. And when we don't have it, we actually shut down. And it's the biggest predictor of happiness and longevity because of that.
Put that around for me. What happens when we do find community? What's the upside for us as individuals, but also, for a city like Seattle?
I mean, if you look at it, I mean, there's so many pieces to it. I mean, being lonely is equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So you just sort of think about that on sort of the flip side of like what that means in terms of health. But what it means in general is like you're more optimistic and hopeful. You have connections for work. You have connections for sort of different opportunities in your life. That includes dating, best friends, etc. If you look at it from an economic standpoint, people who are socially connected are more likely to eat out, go to cafes, go to concerts, basically leave their house. And that's what you need to be able to actually build an economy. You think about neighborhoods, like a lot of our public safety is dependent on you knowing your neighbors. If you don't know your neighbors, it is a great indicator of lack of safety, especially in case of emergencies. So it's a major resilience and public safety variable. So you sort of look across these. If you look at like what is a predeterminant of someone moving up socioeconomic ability, like knowing people in higher income brackets or higher net worth is like one of the greatest predictors of whether or not you're actually going to move up yourself. So if you're not sort of building connections with people who have access to different communities and different opportunities and see the world in different ways, you're likely to get stuck in whatever your current economic status is or decline from there. So it really like across the board um, matters. And then you look at it to your point about polarization, voting, volunteering, philanthropy, like all those things are tied to connection as well. And when they decline, all those things decline. So a lot of what we're seeing in our society now is this decline in connection, which is causing our democracy to fall apart. Volunteering's down, like all these things are falling apart because connection's not working.
We all need bowling teams.
There it is. If only I liked bowling.
Where does this stuff? Yeah, just not your first.
It's not my go-to.
Where does this stuff come from for you? Like, where I don't think this all just started one day out of the blue with the Chamber of Connection. Like, what in your past led you down this path toward caring as much as you do about connection and helping people to build it?
Yeah, my main motivation, like at a strategic level, is really just like democracy and the civil society. And my grandfather did a lot of really like early work in that, was created the Peace Corps and then ran the Aspen Institute for 25 years, which were very much about connection across cultures. So that sort of has always been a motivator to me. I've started the Taproot Foundation when I turned about 30, which was a global movement around helping people serve using their skills to help nonprofits. So if you're in marketing, being able to do marketing pro bono work for nonprofit organizations and scale that up. Wrote the Purpose Economy to really like tell the story about how our economy is moving into a new era where purpose is going to be the driver of economic value. Built a platform for enabling professionals to coach each other without needing a professional coach. So sort of figuring out the human behavior dynamics in that. So this has been sort of part of the theme of what I've cared about my entire career, starting with, my first real work being in prisons, teaching creative writing as a college student, just loving doing that. And then on a personal level, like I just turned 50. So when you turn 50, like you really look at the research and you just reflect, like friendship is the thing that matters. Like earlier on, it's like 20s, it's like finding usually a partner, you start having kids, like work. And then kids start to leave the house and you're like, holy crap, like I have underdeveloped my sort of social life, especially because I've moved 12 times in my life. So there's no college friends that are like where I live. Like I don't have any of that support system. So I was at a meditation retreat and the guy said, what is it you most want in the world right now? And I was like, friendship. And he's like, whatever it is you want is what you need to give. And I love that. And I was just like, okay, like that's what I need to give. And I think that's just was a really profound way for me just to like anchor it in my own personal experience to say, okay, I need to make sure A, we're repairing the world, and that B, friendship is something that I'm giving other people.
Based on that experience yourself, like moving from city to city, but also as someone facilitating that journey for other people, what advice would you have to someone who's joining a new community, who's a part of something they haven't been a part of before and is trying to get connected in?
Yeah. I think one is just, it's an exciting time to think about what is it that you want? Like, what would your life be? You've been sort of usually on autopilot, you've built whatever you built in the past. Now you have a chance to say, how much of that do you want to keep? How much of that do you want to like reimagine? So like take a beat and like think about like, this is an opportunity to reset. And what is it you want to do with that reset? Like it's a door and you can go through it or not, right? So I recommend us taking the time to do that and to apply that. I think the second one is like when you first move somewhere, don't worry so much about finding the perfect, just meet a ton of people. Just go out there and just cast a really broad net and just start to see if there's people who you start to gel with or communities that you want to be a part of, but just really cast that wide net and just get to know folks and to be the initiator. Most people who struggle with connection is because they don't initiate. They're just waiting for someone to show up. So a friend of mine, she did this amazing thing. She moved into her apartment building and she wrote a handwritten letter about herself and put it under the door of everyone on her floor about like what her interests were, just like helping them see things that they might have in common. And then she included in there a letter to her that was like blank that they could fill out and put under her door so she could learn about them. And like they started doing it. And like that just opened up so much opportunity for connection. Whereas in most apartment buildings, people just nod in the elevator. Hey, how's your day? And it's raining outside today. Yep. Like take that initiative and like build that connection, even if it's a little awkward. Like someone's got to do it. And the other thing I would say is invite people into your home. I think as Americans, we don't do that enough. Have people over for dinner, and like it doesn't matter if it's macaroni and cheese. Like it's not about the quality of the food; it's about the company. And just have people over. Break that bubble, that sort of that armor that you put around your home, and like let people into your world because that's where you really build intimacy and connection. When people see not just you and your clothes and what you wear and what you say, but actually like your little world you created for yourself.
Well, it gets less awkward if someone's willing to take the first step. So I appreciate the work
1,000%.
that you're doing to try to open that door for people.
Absolutely.
What advice would you have for, on the other side, community builders? So people who care about bringing other people together, who want to help to develop connection, and are looking at more like systematic approaches. Like, should I be starting with a welcome event? Should I be thinking about the whole thing as a connected experience? Where should I go?
Yeah, it's hard to know without a specific use case, but I think use the word authenticity. So like that's always the starting place, which is like build the thing you want to be a part of. Sort of and begin the process with curiosity, just hearing what people want and what they're looking for, which is why, just doing dinner parties to hear people's journey around the topic, like was really helpful to me in finding that authentic voice for myself, but also from the community. And then I think it's pretty clear in the research that communities generally build at the size of a dinner table. So I think a lot of times we build like these massive communities and they're important, but if you don't then create sub communities that are at that much more human scale, like people don't really get a sense of belonging. They need to feel like they're part of like an 8, 15 max sort of size group and that they're meeting over and over and over again. A lot of our society now is about like doing things one time and then moving on. And we really need to build opportunities for people to show up over and over again with the same people so that they start to actually get to know them, which is why in college you make friends. Why at work you tend to make friends because it's that consistent and they're close to you physically, that you're seeing them over and over again. Like those are the things that actually build that connection. So the community has to reinforce that same behavior.
Project like the Chamber Connection, do you think about storytelling as something you do for the community, something you do with the community, something that comes from the community? What's the relationship between story and community for you?
I think it's all of the above. I don't know that it's one of those things alone. Like I think it's also a wiring. Like I'm a sort of visionary style entrepreneur, which is not to say my visions are right or quality or anything else. It's just the style of entrepreneur I am. And visionary, like to me, starts with a story. It's like, what is the story of that end state of where you're trying to go that you're using to inspire people to see that something's possible? And I think that's been my gift, is being able to help people see something is possible that they didn't think was possible, by telling that story and telling the story what their role in that could be to get started. What are those first couple of steps on that journey to get to that better place, to that future state that they want to be? So that's how I guess lead intuitively, but layering into that, I think there's so much around helping people then find like, what is your story in that? You're a character in that. Like, what is your story going to be? And like, there's a setting. I'm like, what's the story of the setting? So I think each of these things need their stories because that's what actually causes them to stick and for people to feel it's real.
That's that interface between your idea and your vision and someone's actual lived experience.
Yeah, it's the layering of it. It's like the complexity. I mean, if you think about it in terms of a movie, like there's the overall sort of vision for the movie, but like there's each scene has a story, each character has a backstory. Like that's what makes the richness of that overall movie. And the simplest pitch of like the general plot line is not going to cut it. It needs all those sub stories and backstories.
Richness. Well, anything in this work that surprised you overall that you wouldn't have expected when you started out, however many years ago, in helping people to connect?
I don't know, surprise. Like I think there's delight in just individuals. I think there's lots of like day-to-day like operational surprises about how to get things done. There's lots of ways people surprise you. I think that the thing is always like stands out to me is just how everyone is so different and sort of the beauty of that, but also how there really are patterns between people. And if you're willing to see the patterns, you can help more people. And that some people don't see the world through pattern and they do an amazing job of helping a few. But if you can actually look at pattern, that's where you can start to create a story with a lot more characters in it. And sort of that interplay. So that's been like a really important sort of like learning journey for me of just how to go about doing that. I think the other thing, I guess, overall in my career is that people are missing connection and purpose, like full up. And a lot of people lack the creativity and imagination to realize what people are willing to do for purpose and connectivity. So they think in very economic terms. So like over and over again, people are like, oh, we don't have the resources for that. And I'm like, we definitely have the resources for that. Like if we can tell people how they can be part of something bigger and get to meet people, they will be able to provide like endless resources to move this forward. Is that enough? Like you need other things as well, but there's so much generosity out there if you give people an opportunity to be part of something positive, social, and ongoing. It's remarkable how much untapped resource there is in our community.
Appreciate that as a call to action. Are you telling the story of Chamber of Connection kind of in present tense as you go? Is that something that's out there where people can kind of follow along and see what's working for you guys and hopefully take some inspiration?
I think if I understand your question, we're not like journaling or creating like the documentary of like as we go, which would have been fun. But we have our website, chamberofconnection.org, which really has all of our research and resources and connects to our social media, which is telling our story as we go along. So that's probably the best part. And then we've partnered with the local ABC affiliate here in Seattle, and we do a segment every 2 weeks with them, just helping to teach people about connection and highlight community builders in the Seattle area. So that's been really delightful just to be able to partner with them to get that message out. So, looking for ways to get that story out more and to show people it is this seemingly insurmountable thing of like disconnection. Like we actually can address it if we all come together to address it. And that's one of my sort of unofficial taglines is like, let's come together. We need to come together to come together. Like if we don't actually come together as the people working on this, like we're not going to be able to come together in the broadest sense. And that's what we need to do right now.
If people want to follow you, connect with you, learn more about your work outside of Chamber of Connection, what's the best place to do that?
LinkedIn is probably the best spot. So definitely reach out. Easy to find on LinkedIn. Send me a connection request. Love to meet you. Learn about the work you're doing. So please do that. And then, chamberofconnection.org is sort of our core website.
Well, thank you, Aaron. I really appreciate your time taken to tell us about what you're doing. And I know it'll be an inspiration to a lot of people out there who are looking to build community themselves.
Thanks, Tom. And thanks for like really helping shine a light on storytelling and community, because that is what we need in the world right now. And we need to build a community of the people doing that so that we can all learn from each other and amplify all these stories. So love that you're doing this.
I hear a lot of talk about how big of a problem loneliness is in modern society. I think that's something a lot of us feel, myself included sometimes. Loneliness is hard, and if we're not careful, it can feel like a personal failure. Maybe I'm not putting myself out there in the right ways, or maybe I'm just not that likable. Or maybe the problem is everyone else, just not caring enough to show up and connect. Connection does take work on all of our parts, but I don't think it's an entirely individual problem or that it's just on us as individuals to fix this. The work that we do as community builders is an essential part of responding to this shared challenge. I really appreciate when people like Aaron Hurst not only care about the people around them, but are willing to experiment with innovative approaches to making it easier for us all to connect. Aaron is designing new on-ramps so that it's at least a little bit easier for the people around him to be a part of a community. Aaron's taking some big swings. He's taking some big swings, but these types of experiments don't have to be time-consuming or expensive. There's a tremendous amount of value in trying anything new, however small, that has the potential to make it easier for the people around us to talk to each other. So if you're listening and thinking about how to create your own version of any of the things Aaron has piloted, I'd suggest starting small. Look for somewhere in your community where there might be people lingering on the margins of participation. What's one small thing that you could personally do to make the community feel even a little bit less intimidating and more welcoming? What type of on-ramp could you create, even if it's just for a few people, to make getting started feel more human? I'd love to hear what you try. Send me a message at storylinking.com/talk. I'm Tom Leeds, and this is Storylinking.